Welcome to the Minnesota Rovers Tuesday evening presentation. Minnesota Rovers is an outdoors club based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Our members organize trips that range from 1 hour to 2 weeks in Minnesota or further afield. Examples of our activities include hiking, biking, backpacking, skiing, snowshoeing, paddling, and rock climbing. We also organize conservation and trail clearing trips. Our members have experience and skills in many outdoor activities, so if you want to learn a new outdoor activity, we can probably help you. For more information, go to mnrovers.org. Now let's move on to this week's presentation.
Tonight, you're here to hear about conservation volunteering, travel with a purpose. Joan McKiernan is a recently retired biology instructor who taught a variety of courses, including environmental science and field biology. Trained as an ornithologist, her interest having expanded to learning about all aspects of nature. We were so fortunate to have her last summer at Como, and so please warmly welcome back tonight's speaker, Joan McKiernan.
All right, thank you. So first of all, during my presentation, if you want to ask questions, feel free to just either put it on the chat. And of course, now I'm getting my cat coming to visit me, as she often does during presentations. So you can put it in the chat, or you can just unmute and ask me the question right out loud. So that is, either way is fine with me. All right, so what I wanted to talk about is conservation volunteering, and that's basically, I stole this definition from one of the websites, giving your time to protect, repair, and restore the environment. And I'm going to talk specifically about two conservation volunteering that I did, the first one in Costa Rica and the second one in Australia. And I should mention, this is mostly about international conservation volunteering. So let's talk a little bit about, what might be the difference. So you could do it, conservation volunteering locally. If you're a master naturalist, as will be talked about in 2 weeks, or maybe you do Nature Conservancy, or even, with rovers and doing the trail maintenance on the border trail. Could be considered conservation volunteering to some degree. And basically, when you're doing this locally, it's little to no travel. It's a single day, or maybe you do it a regular time. I'm doing it once a week. I'm going to go do something over there. And there's typically no fee involved. Okay. But if you're doing it internationally, okay, and actually some of what I talked about, there are some kind of conservation volunteering opportunities local, in the US also, that you could do, and I'll take a look at those too. But for me, international means you're going to travel to a destination, and sort of the part of the point of there is to try to go to a country, not just be a tourist, to see a particular area in more detail than what you might see as a tourist, and to really bring something back to the community. Okay. And it could be most of the opportunities that I've seen are sort of 1 week to several weeks, sometimes like for, and this is something is, for all ages. Well, I should say all ages, typically 18 and older. And and for the younger folks, it could be many of them can do internships where they get credit for doing that internship, doing that conservation volunteering. So if you are of that age or have children of that age, that might be an opportunity for them to do. Okay. But there are fees involved with the conservation volunteering, and they do not include travel to and from the site and anything else there. So it can be quite a bit more expensive than your local volunteering for master naturalists. So you're talking about usually over $1,000 to $4,000 for some of these things, depending upon how long you're going to be there for. Now, so some of the things you could do, the types of international opportunities that I have seen is one is conducting surveys. So wildlife surveys, or as I'm going to talk about, turtle surveys or other types of surveys are frequently done. So some of them are done as a citizen science type of opportunity, and some of them can be done as part of a research project with a principal investigator, what we call PI, involved. And so, and I'll kind of point out some of that at the end. I'll point out a place which does a lot more scientific stuff versus just something that's more science, citizen science. Not that citizen science is bad or anything like that. Protecting wildlife can be involved in this. So, I'm trying to think. In some places they are helping to build up the local community to help promote, protecting the wildlife and how important it is, and some other things that they might be involved in. Restoring habitats can be involved. One is there's a lot of rehabilitating injured or diseased wildlife. When I was in Australia, a friend of mine who used to volunteer at a bat hospital showed me. We went to the bat hospital she used to volunteer for, and so we would see these are flying. Well, actually, the one that's being fed is not a flying fox. That's called the diadem. I forgot what kind of bat it is, but it's not one of the big flying fox bats. And then this is the nursery. So these are all youngs that were, abandoned in some way or another that they're trying to raise and do that help with. And then there can also be community projects. And so community projects might not necessarily be conservation volunteering, but you could still do it. Something like helping, empower women in their community. I've also seen, though, like trying to promote and develop recycling projects in towns as a community project. So they can kind of vary as to what kind of community projects you might have. If you are in a country who doesn't speak English, might help to know the language, but doesn't always have to be done to know the language. So I was involved in 2 conservation volunteering activities. The first was in Costa Rica. And what had happened here is that I had been hoping, I had a sabbatical. So I had the luxury of sabbaticals every once in a while I was teaching. And I was in a sabbatical that was scheduled for the fall of 2020 to 2020, then the spring of 2021. And I was hoping to get a Fulbright scholarship, which would have put me in Malawi for 6 months, but I didn't actually get that. And when I didn't get it, then I started looking for conservation volunteering activities because I was aware of this as something to do. And then, of course, COVID hit, and that really limited as to what I could do. But I was able to work in at the very end of the summer of 2021, after being vaccinated, and a lot of these projects were reopening back up and taking a lot of care. As you saw in this picture right here, we were wearing, let's go back to it, our COVID masks whenever we were in a somewhat enclosed area. So, so we were taking a bunch of precautions during that time. So when I was there, I was, there's in the northeast part of Costa Rica that you can see, oopsie, guess I don't have my pen on. Right there, you can see the National Park Tortuguero, which means sea turtles. And it's this long park right here. I'm hoping you're seeing my mouse moving up and down the screen. And there's a town called Tortuguero right there. That's where all the tourists come in to see the sea turtles. And then there's a 15-mile long beach, which is prohibited to the tourists. And we were at the very tip of it down here where it says Holova. And that's where our base camp was. And so that's where the only people allowed on this beach were, there were some campesinos. There's a small farm down there. So a few of the farmers there, the people, the national park people, and then us were the only people allowed on this 15-mile beach. Doesn't mean that there weren't people that were supposed to be there. And so the camp, so we were set up in a camp there that was, 2 days before arrival looked like this, where it had been flooded. And so kind of delayed our going down to the camp. And there's sort of layover. So there are people already there, and then a new group comes in, and then people leave. So there's people coming and going the whole time. And again, some people were staying 8 to 10 weeks. Some people were just there for 2 weeks. And so it had rained a lot just before we got there. And so you can see this is basically our accommodations. You can see how they're stilted on stilts, so that to take into account when flooding occurs. Very primitive type of conditions. This is our well. So we would fill up this well, this tower, once a day, and that was our water for the day. We could go to the well. If we needed to use toilets, we'd go to the well, grab water in a bucket and use that to flush the toilets. We could take showers. They were cold showers, but at 87 degrees outside, cold showers felt quite good. And you always timed them to be at the end of the day so that you could sleep, because we had no electricity in our dorms. And so we were, had no fans, no air conditioning. So you cooled yourself off at the end of the day. I did have a kitchen, which did have electricity. So they had some solar panels that provided electricity for 2 of the buildings. And that was the staff dormitory, and then the kitchen. So we could run some things in the kitchen, but we didn't have a refrigerator and or an oven. So, so what we could cook was quite limited. And this was the dormitory that I stayed in, called Mariposa, which means, butterfly. So it's very basic type of facilities there. So while we were there, we took part in 4 research projects. People could sign up to be focusing on sea turtles or on the jaguar, or it could be wildlife conservation. I signed up for the wildlife conservation, which means I took part in all of these, but only got I only did the sea turtle nesting at night once, okay, and the jaguar trail camera once. I did a lot more forest vertebrate surveys. And so for sea turtles research, basically what you do is you go out at night, and you can't use a white flashlight, and you can't use flash photography. So any of these pictures were taken during the day. And you would basically go along the beach, look for these turtle tracks, and then, we got a lot of training on this. I will say we got training beforehand. And so that we watched a lot of videos, and then we got training once we got there. So a lot of training was involved, but you still have someone, who's in charge, who's determining that if we find turtle tracks, he would go up and then check to see if there's a turtle there. What stage of nesting was it at? And could we then go up? If it was before they laid eggs, then we could go up and, count the eggs as the female was laying it. So you would lay right behind the female and then count eggs as she was laying the things, and then laying the eggs, and then she would bury them in the turtle nest. This particular female was still burying stuff during the day, so someone was able to get a date picture of it. So at night we would go along this beach, completely no flashlights. When we did find a turtle, we would turn on our red flashlights and then work with our red flashlights the whole time. And there were some other things involved in sea turtle research. We would look during the day, do some surveys, or look to see whether nests had been depredated or hatched out. And if hatched out, count how many eggs hatched out, so we could see what their hatching out rates were and everything else like this. And the main turtle while I was there was the green turtle, but they do get, on the other side of the green turtle season, they do get some loggerheads and leatherbacks and some other things in there. Okay, the other cool thing about Tortuguero is that it's the only place in the world where jaguars consistently kill sea turtles, okay? And not enough to decrease the population. But they do kill sea turtles. I never saw a jaguar, saw tracks, saw kills. This is a jaguar kill of a sea turtle. The black vultures are coming in to feed on it. And you would see sometimes 50 black vultures around a sea turtle kill. Once the jaguar got what it's wanted, then it would, sometimes they would come back and get more, but the black vultures would get their thing on there. Once we found a kill, so what the jaguar research was trail camera work. So they would set up trail cameras, had permanent trail cameras on through out the 15 miles of the beach. We would check out like regularly 6 of them, and then every once in a while a group would walk the whole 15 miles down that beach and check all the cameras. I never got to do that. But it would have been it's quite the day when they do that. And then when we do see a dead turtle like this one, then we'd set up a trail camera like this one, what they call a kill camera, and then watch the jaguars as they come and go and who comes. He has found the researcher doing this, his name is Ian, and Ian found all sorts of interesting behaviors that people thought, like these guys are active during the day. They do not talk to each other. Well, they do interact with a lot of others. They're not solitary, and all sorts of different behaviors that he found that he was able to get on his trail cameras. So we involved in that, even though I didn't get to see any jaguars. We also did forest vertebrate surveys where we would sometimes, walk during the day or walk during at night a standard path. So we had to start here at this time, and then be at the end of it by this time. So it was very standardized, and we would count any vertebrates from something like this, this slender anole. This is the most common lizard and probably the most common vertebrate we would find on these particular vertebrate surveys. We would also see birds like this red lord parrot. A lot of the birds you had to identify by sound is oftentimes with birds. So I didn't get great pictures of the birds that we would frequently see on these things. Also at night, we would get a lot of the amphibians, different frogs during this time. And so that was kind of cool. I have all sorts of different frog pictures. This is a Fitzinger's robber frog. And then sometimes, very rarely, we'd get a mammal, and you're probably thinking like we might get a howler monkey or something there, but you might thinking, what is this mammal in this picture? And so this is one I'm quite proud that I spotted, and it's still kind of hard to see, but right there is a sloth. Okay, so we got I can't remember whether it was a 3-toed or 2-toed sloth. So I got to see that. Still some mammals down there I haven't gotten to see down there. And then we also did butterfly surveys. This was a new survey that they just started doing. We try to catch butterflies. This is a owl, a banded owl moth. No, butterfly. And it's a moth. I can't remember which. Anyways, it's a butterfly. And so then we would catch them, and then they would, on the standard grid, take a picture of them so they could check out the size on them and take pictures of them. And I don't know what else they would do with them. So it was a new project that was just being done. Sometimes the moths were quite, calm, and this one sat on this guy's head for over an hour. Some were very hard to catch. The blue morpho butterfly is a very hard butterfly to catch, if you've ever heard of blue morphos. The one thing about this project that I least liked, other than the heat and humidity, was the amount of free time. So while on this thing, I might just be assigned one vertebrate survey a day. So that means I work 1 hour, and then I have lots of free time. And for some of the younger folks, they were doing, and I was the oldest in this group. The next youngest person was 32 years old. Besides the jaguar scientist, he was also a somewhat older gentleman. And so some of them were doing internships, so they had like papers to write and other things to do. Wi-Fi was somewhat limited, but they could still use their computers. And so we did some things, like we built some things. So we would go out into the nearby coconut field and cut down bamboo that was growing there. And then we would prepare it and build a little lean-to for playing games on. And then we could swim on the beach, but we had to be careful because of riptide. So we really couldn't go out very far. So we were just mostly where we could stand. And then they did plan a few trips for us. So like we went kayaking one day outside of Tortuguero. But so like I got a little bit bored on this, I wanted a bird, but I could only bird from this certain area because you're not allowed to go past this area without other people and without your boots on and everything else like that. And so it was somewhat a little bit constraining for me. All right. And so then, but I really loved it. And I also did some other, it was my second time to Costa Rica, and I was able to do, fit in some birding afterwards in Monteverde and other thing, stuff like that. Then the second time is this Great Barrier Reef volunteering. So this was, this past fall, mid-September to mid-October, I was in Australia for a month, of which 8 days of it was doing conservation volunteering. Really not 8 days. I thought it was going to be 8 days, but I was a little bit confused on what was entailed on this project. But after doing some traveling in Sydney and Brisbane, I went up to Cairns. And in Cairns then is where a lot of people go to see the Great Barrier Reef. You can go up further north, but this is most accessible. There's some other places too, but a lot of people go to Cairns. And it's a fun little town. It has 2 islands off the coast, which where they have ferries that go to. And so that's where we did a lot of our work, is on Green Island and Fitzroy Island. And so what I got confused at is first of all, it says 12 days, and this is sort of tricky, but they say, oh, you get 2 free days. So you're not really paying for 12 days. You're paying for, what I finally figured out is I really was only paying for 8 days. And 3 of those 8 days was actually being a tourist and not a conservation volunteering, because we were sent out. I had the opportunity to go scuba diving. I had just gotten my certification to go scuba diving on the outer parts of the reef. Beyond those 2 islands that we were talking about. And so we lived on what they call a live-aboard boat, and there were 31 tourists, and then the staff on there. You have, cabins with just 2, bunk beds. What I liked about the bathrooms is the bathrooms also served as showers. My first day there, I was like, why are these bathrooms all really wet? They must have just cleaned them. I didn't realize that somebody was showering in that bathroom. So, but we did, in those 3 days, we did 11 dives, including being at night. And so I saw, and you see lots of corals, lots of different colored fish, sharks, but they're not big enough to eat you. A lot of sea cucumbers. I'll show you some pictures of these. And so it was a lot of fun. And then we started the research. And so the research projects here there are 3: coral color surveys, stationary or rapid monitoring surveys, and then turtle video surveys. Okay. And we also did 1 morning of plastic beach cleanup. And that's what we're kind of, in this particular picture, we're supposed to take a picture in a particular place and show what plastic we've picked up. And we're supposed to be silly. So we're being silly. This is me right here, if you can't tell. And then this is some of the plastic we picked up on the beach. So we did 1 morning of beach cleanup. Now, when everyone thinks of corals, they see pictures like this. And that is not, I don't know where they take this picture, but that's not what the Great Barrier Reef looks like. It is not this colorful. I asked the guys there, I imagine this big colors, and they said, it looks more like this. Okay. So there's a lot of dead coral, and it's not from bleaching. It is from, let me see, I see some pictures, so I'm going to see. Jaguars, did the jaguars eat any of the turtles? Oh yeah, they left. That's why they kill the turtles, is to eat them. But some of it is left over for the birds, for the vultures. The bugs weren't really that bad. At night they were. When we did surveys at night, you dressed up, you got yourself completely covered, no matter how hot it was. And you always made sure you carried lots of water. So at night they were kind of bad, and we had mosquito netting in our beds, but they really weren't that bad during the day. I never used bug spray the whole time. I don't think I used it when I was down there. And I'll talk about how we find similar trips in the future. So I'll get to that at the end. Okay. So anyways, so so most of the corals, well, what I saw was not this colorful. Maybe there are other places, maybe somebody can comment where they've been to coral reefs and been this colorful. I asked the guy and he said, well, a lot of corals die. And so that's just natural, and so other corals are kind of up on top of it. And that sometimes these, I'm using a bad GoPro, so I don't have the best camera in the world when I'm taking this picture here. But you can see the color of the parrotfish right here. And it's just that sometimes these are like during really great lighting conditions and they maybe have using lighting on it. So that, I don't know, maybe even colorized. But I did not see anything like that top picture. What I saw mostly was more like this lower picture. And this was in the spring, their austral spring. So it's before bleaching actually occurs on the corals. But what our job was to take the corals and sort of to say, find a coral and then using a color chart, compare that and say what colors are on that coral. So then they could document what kind of bleaching would occur. So we used sort of an underwater clipboard with pencil and would write on this underwater. And, these are the colors. The type of coral is BO, like boulder-like, or BR, I forget what that means. And then you have the color chart and you would kind of compare that with that. And then you would take temperature and take some other data there. So that's kind of what the coral surveys. It's the project I thought was the least scientific, very subjective. I don't know why they don't just take pictures of stuff and then use a color chart, to do it that way. The rapid monitoring surveys, I kind of like these a little bit better. You just basically, you selected a spot on the reef, very random. So again, not standardized. So not, again, to me, not the best scientific method, but, still kind of fun. And then you would observe you would stay in the same place and observe a 5-meter radius of what you saw. And there were certain categories of things that you could see. So like, for instance, you might record how many grazing fish there were, okay? Or how many sea cucumbers. And if you're not familiar with sea cucumbers, these are related to sea stars or starfish, okay? Or sea urchins. They're all in the same echinoderm phylum. And then, or also the types of angelfish. Now, this isn't the picture I took because I didn't have a great picture of an angelfish. Or not angelfish, butterfly fish. And so then, we would record butterfly fish. And there were some other categories, like if we saw a sea turtle or other things that we would record. And then, so we would then did a habitat assessment where we might look at the habitat and say, how much is dead coral? How much is live coral? How much is vegetation? Like here, you can see the sea cucumber is around vegetation. And we did some stuff like that. Okay, I did see that somebody put a question mark in the chat. Oopsie, I lost my ability to look at the chat. All right, I'll get back to chat questions in a minute. And then we did turtle video surveys where we just swim around looking for turtles and we would take pictures of them, preferably the left side, but also then go to the right side, not just pictures, but videos. And so with the idea being that a sea turtle, just like jaguars, spots are unique. Also, the sea turtle scale patterns are unique. So they could identify individuals and follow along the individuals as to where they're at. This one's not a very good picture, but you might be able to see how these scales here are different than the scales on this one, even though this is the other side of a head. And there's another one too. You can see the patterns on this. Are a little bit different. You kind of have to really look to see some of the differences, but here's got this little square thing here. You don't see that little thing, that rectangle there. So they look at those and then they identify and name them, and then they can follow the individuals as they are around this island. And so that one I felt was kind of the most scientific of the projects we were doing. Okay. So things to consider while you are looking for projects, okay? One is, are you working with a profit or nonprofit organization? So the first group I was with, the Costa Rica one, that was with a profit organization called GVI. And I have links to these and I'll try to post them in the chat in a few minutes. And then the second one, the Oceans to Earth in Australia, was a nonprofit. And I would say, profit's going to probably cost more. but it also might be a little bit more organized and do a little bit better with training. At least, again, and I have sample size of 1 for each of these, so it could vary. But that was sort of my experience with these. The profit spend. But I did actually have one interesting coincidence happen here, is that the person who ran the Australia project happened to be work for 3 years in that Costa Rica project in Holova. She trained the people that I worked with. She left about 6 months before I got there. So she was telling me, the difference. She says the profit spends a lot more of money on marketing and promotional material than the nonprofit does. So you're probably going to spend a little bit more with a profit, but I felt like the training for the profit was a lot better. And I felt I understood better of what to expect than I did with the nonprofit. And again, this could be just the way the 2 companies work as opposed to which one is which. Other things, sustainability. Look to what they're saying about sustainability. These are, if you're not familiar with this is the United Nations Sustainability Goals. And a lot of these companies will tie in and say, this project addresses these sustainable goals. That's what the GVI, the profit company, did. Much better than the nonprofit company did. But the nonprofit company was still pretty good with sustainability. The woman that was running it, made sure that, like she said, we used to look at this turtle rehabilitation center, but we have disagreed with how they run it. We feel like they're not being very sustainable and useful for the turtles, so we don't do it anymore. So you could see some things like that that are that are important. So I would, definitely look to see what they say about sustainability. Also, the quality of the science. Again, I felt like the science was better on Costa Rica than it was in Australia. They were tied to real specific projects, but I'm going to show you in a minute something called Earthwatch, which is really tied to very specific projects. Time commitment. Again, sort of, and I mean like during the day. So like some of them will actually say you will be busy 5 to 6 hours during the day. Neither of the projects that I went to said that, but it was pretty obvious with the Australia that I was going to be pretty much busy from the minute we got on the island till the to the end of the day. So we were pretty busy. We had to take an hour-long ferry, so we had some downtime with that. But I mean, it was, and then we had the evening free. We stayed in Cairns in a hostel, and so not the Ritz or anything like that. You could put yourself in a better place if you wanted to while you were there. I enjoyed the hostel. I liked the interaction with everyone there, and being able to cook my own meals and other things like that. Even though I did live in a dorm situation, so I lived with 3 other, the room I had, they had 3 other women in it. And then the level of activity. Some of the sites will say this is easy, moderate, or very extraneous. And so you want to kind of look at what level of activity and what is important for you. And then your level of comfort. Like, are you willing to have to get a bucket every time you have to go to the bathroom and throw that down the toilet? Are you willing to, have non-refrigerated food for a week and eat that and not eat much meat, any meat or anything like that? So, so when we were in Costa Rica, there was, none of the meals had meat in them, a lot of beans, which I am not a big fan of. So different levels of comfort can go along with different of these projects. So those are just some of the things that you might want to consider as you're looking for different projects. And so I will try to copy this and get it into the chat. But so Oceans to Earth, they have a lot of projects. This is the one I did in Australia. So they're a nonprofit. GVI, that's the one I did in Costa Rica. They're the for-profit. They're run out of Britain or South Africa. I'm not sure which. But so their time zone is different from working with us. Well, Oceans to Earth also is run out of Australia. And then, but there's also some, I don't know what you call them, clearinghouses or agents or what they are, but there's some websites you can go to, which will have a lot of projects underneath them that they have sort of investigated to make sure they're legitimate. And so you can do this. So International Volunteer HQ. a lot of the people on the Oceans to Earth Australia project had actually done it through International Volunteering, IVHQ. Those people did it through IVHQ, didn't do the scuba diving at the very beginning. Okay, so it depends upon how you are. However, you might pay more. I think like IVHQ was $200 more if I had done it through them. However, if something happens and you can't go to yours, you can easily switch to another project if you want to, so there's some advantages to doing the IVHQ. And another site also which does this, which I was just looking at when I was getting ready for this, was something called Projects Abroad. And so they are kind of like the same thing. And I'll show you one of the site that's one in a minute. And then I saw years, when I was first trying to think about, I might do something in Africa. This Encosini Eco Experience looks like a cool one. So it looks, and it's less expensive than these other ones. So these are like Oceans to Earth cost for 8 days cost me, and now I got to remember, about a little bit less than $2,000, I think. GVI was $2,400 for 2 weeks. And the Ecosini was like $1,400 for 2 weeks or something like that. So it's a little less expensive. But I'm going to ask a friend of mine in Africa whether they are aware, who works for the wildlife department, whether she's aware of this and whether she thinks they do good work or not. And then where I first heard about conservation volunteering was in Earthwatch, where when I was a grad student, some of the faculty I knew were using Earthwatch Institute to get people, a lot of retired people, to help them with their research. So you could sign up and do actual scientific research. You're assigned to a specific project and work with that. And I'll show you that website too in a minute. This, though, tends to be, I don't know, it seemed to me like it was a lot more expensive. All right, I see some chats. Let me see some questions. Okay, so yeah, so we did. So looking at the question on, did the trip coordinators talk about the impact of global warming on color and health of the coral reefs? Yes, we did get that kind of discussion, and also talking about plastic effects on the reef. So we did get a lot of that kind of discussion in part of our training. So the first day of the snorkeling part, we actually didn't snorkel, it was training, and then we had 4 days of actual snorkeling and doing surveys. And so that was discussed a lot in that. And the coral triangle is good for color, maybe, yeah. So that might be better than everyone there says, oh, the Great Barrier Reef is the best place in the world, but I kind of suspect maybe Kim can talk more a little bit about the color in the Indonesia. And I don't know if anybody's been snorkeling in the Caribbean, if it's any better. If you're interested, you can take a picture of the screen. Jen O was telling people that you could do that here, but I'm going to try to, I'll just copy it and put it in the chat too, if anybody wants to. And of course, as Stacy says, these are recorded, and you can always go back and I got to find my chat. I'm going to stop screening this. Oopsie. There's the chat. So there's a lot of the links there if you want to go look at them. Now, what I wanted to show you is I'm going to share again. This time I'm going to share my my screen. So I put a lot of these then are the sites. So so here's the Projects Abroad one, and the IVHQ is also very similar. And so what you can do for this one is like filter down, what kind of projects do you want to work on? Let's see, it's not working. There we go. Do I want to do wildlife conservation volunteering? So that's what I want to do. Okay. Destinations. I want to go to, come on, it's not. Destinations. I want to go to South Africa. Okay. And then I want to do, who is this for? So you can then filter out the projects on these, so I want to do, I don't know, it doesn't have, age 50 grown-up specials. Okay. So it has then, and so you can then whittle it down via this way. And so they say for me, then, these are some of the projects I could be doing in some of these areas. And so that's kind of nice. Now, so I was using the IVHQ to find my Australia place, but then once I saw this is part of Oceans to Earth, I decided to go through Oceans to Earth directly instead of using the IVHQ. So, so you can use this and then find out what the project is, and then go directly to there if you want. Okay. Let's see. And then I'll just show you one more site, and that's the Earthwatch. Is this Earthwatch? Yeah. So here's Earthwatch. So they've been doing this for many years. And as I said, since my grad school, so that's like 40 years ago. And so you can browse. They have different, what they call expeditions. And so this changes from year to year. Most of the other places are like their standard. The one in Costa Rica actually has moved. So it's no longer at Jolava in the Tortuguero. And that's because somebody messed up on their permits and didn't talk to the Costa Rican government as well as they should have. And so many of them have these standardized sites where people are coming and going. The Earthwatch, what they do though, as I said, is and some of these projects have been going on for a while, but some of them it's like, I'm a PhD student. I need someone to help me for 3 seasons, and I'm going to get people to help me for 3 seasons, and then I'm done. Okay. So, and so you can, focus on what type of research, and it says who's the lead scientist is, your duration, how much it is, starting price again, and depending upon how long you're on, and you look at your dates and other things like that. So that's Earthwatch. And again, you can kind of put down new adult when you want to go. So there's ways to filter it out of what you want to do on these projects. So I think that's all that I have to share. So I'm open to any questions. Did any more questions come? Is airfare to get to the place extra? Yes. So what they don't pay for, of course, is airfare, because that can change. I mean, you have people coming from Australia to Costa Rica or from the US to Costa Rica. That price can change. That's something you have to pay for. Also, your travel insurance you have to pay for. And they insist upon travel insurance, so you have to get some. And then, like if someone had gotten injured in Jolava, they would have to take them they'd have to call in a helicopter to bring them all the way back to San Jose. And so a lot of those expenses. So a lot of the meals are paid for, but not necessarily all. So for instance, when I was in Australia, they paid for our noonday meal, but we breakfast and dinner was on us, which, when you're staying at the hostel, you can make it quite cheap. But you can also go out to dinner if you want, but when I was in Costa Rica, all the meals were paid for, except for when we went to town. And, when we were in town, then we would pay for our own meals and other things like that. So in those trips like that trip for kayaking, we had to pay for that kayaking trip. So that was extra. Any other questions? So I really, highly recommend it. Again, doing a web search, looking for different places, looking to see, what looks legitimate. Sometimes for GVI, the one in Costa Rica, because I was working directly, that organization was working directly with the Minister of Science. I had to have the criminal background check done, and that I had to pay for. So you have to, sometimes they are a lot more expense involved with it than you think. But again, I like the fact that it seemed to be, higher scientific level than the Oceans to Earth project in Australia.
Do you have to deal with the local currency at all, or?
Oh yeah, so like that Oceans to Earth website is all in Australian dollars, so it looks a lot more expensive. And then you see, the Australian dollar, it might cost $1,900 there, which means $1,600 for us, or something like that. So, but yeah, you have, well, and actually in Australia, almost everything was done by credit card. Nobody pays with cash in Australia anymore. I mean, there are a few places like in Sydney, you would use your credit card to just pop it up. Taking a bus, you would just put it up there like, you tap it, okay? You tap it in, where you get on, and then tap it when you get off. But when you got the cans on the bus system there, you had to have a 50-cent piece or a dollar piece. But that's all it cost, was to go from the cans, botanical gardens, back to the hostel, So that was about the only time where I really had to have cash on me. Everywhere else, I've got cash, but I was like trying to slough it off in various places. So it was most everything there in Australia is by credit card, which I accumulated, some international fees then on my thing. I added it up yesterday. It was $71 of international fees compared to like $3,000 or more that I spent while I was there. So, and then in Costa Rica, then you did you can use ATMs in Costa Rica and get colones while you're there, and pay a lot through credit card too.
Yeah, thanks.
The first time I was in Costa Rica, I was teaching students there. So I was there for 8 weeks teaching students environmental science while I was down there. So I got to do a lot while I was there the first time. Anybody else have done some conservation volunteering abroad? Can talk about their experience at all? No, this is new to people. Okay, so again, I really think it's a fun way, maybe a little bit more added expense than what you'd like, but a really fun way to get to know a country. I feel like, I did a lot of traveling around also while I was in Australia. So I got to see some other parts too, but like, I really felt like, I was contributing to the country while I was there and not just, using up resources while I was there. So there are a lot of different organizations, and so I'm hoping that these websites here will kind of help you whittle it down. What level of scuba diving license did I get? So I just got the basic level, and I could have, if I wanted to. So the scuba diving course, you could actually, if you have your PADI, your basic level, you could have taken some advanced courses on that 3-day scuba trip. And so some of the other people did that. They were taking the advanced class, and then there was some did another class. I can't remember what it was. But so the scuba diving, the scuba diving place was different than the Oceans to Earth. And so when I actually got there and I was saying, I'm part of Oceans to Earth, the guy was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so that was something I felt like I was not as well informed about, is that this was sort of an extra thing added to the expense and not part of the conservation volunteering. Some credit cards. I don't know. My credit card, I don't have a Capital One, so I don't have a credit card there. I should check to see which ones are better at that. So, but that's good advice, Linda, to check on your credit card.
Well, are there any last questions for Joan while we have her and we can pick her brain? If not, then I guess we will conclude this evening, this part of the program. Joan, thank you so much for coming and for informing us about how we can travel and do good at the same time. So thank you very much for that. And maybe we'll see you back this summer at Como.
A couple other things I was thinking about. Earthwatch, by the way, does have some domestic research. So some stuff in California or Idaho, I forget where. So if you check out their site, you might find some stuff in the US, projects for you to do there. One I was considering to do was one in Cuba. But I was kind of a little bit worried. So if, how well the Cuba thing would work once, during the pandemic. And then, shoot, what was my other thought? I had another quick thought. Yeah, anyway, so you can do some of that. Oh, I know what I was thinking. And sometimes you can look to see while you're traveling, is there a day that somebody, a local group is just doing a beach cleanup or something like that. So you could look for that when you go to the country and say, hey, I might just, I'm going to be a tourist most of this time, but I can spend a day when I'm in Puerto Rico doing a beach cleanup, or something like that. So you could look for one-day opportunities while you're there too.
Okay. All right. Well, any other last questions for Joan? Any last comments from Joan? No? All right. Well,
comment to Joan. I very much appreciate your presentation and for planting these seeds. Something I kind of think about, and now the thoughts will go further. Maybe it'll become a reality one day.
Yep. I hope some of you are able to get that opportunity to do this.
Thanks for watching this Minnesota Rovers presentation. If you want to see more, please click on the link to our channel or the subscribe button below. Thank you.